Welcome, everybody.
Hey, hey. Good boy, Tucker.
Work smarter where you want.
This is learning at its most fun.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Takeover Tuesday event. This month, we have Charesse Spiller with us. She is a consultant and founder of Level Best, a virtual process and operations consulting practice based in Houston, Texas. And I know personally, when I'm working with offices every day with Redtail, the number one thing I get asked is, do you know any consultants that can kind of help me with getting everything started? So Charesse is one of those girls, and she is going to provide a ton of great information. She's a big friend of the company. One of my counterparts, Haley, works really closely with her, so I know she has some great credentials. But Level Best Partners exclusively works with financial planners and proactively engages with each firm. So that way she can kind of analyze your current process, create new systems, and implement them, which is the hardest part, so that you can seamlessly scale your business. Because sometimes that factor that holds everyone back is that human factor. So getting that implementation going is really key. She has experience working with multiple firms across the US. She has shown the ins and outs of what makes financial planning firms successful, while drawing key knowledge from three core areas: the financial planning process, the client experience, and technology integrations. So really valuable stuff there. Charesse has been invited and spoken at XYPN Live, FPA, LPL, and TD Ameritrade National Link conferences, and has been featured on various industry-specific podcasts and publications. So we're really happy to have her here, and we have some really great content prepared for today. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Charesse, and we'll get started.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the intro, and thank you all for being here with me today. I'm really excited about this presentation. And I just wanted to add, I do have a background in the planning industry. So I used to be a planner before I started Level Best in 2016. So I'm really excited about today's presentation. We're going to talk about a lot of things. So I'm just going to dive in on that. So what I want to cover today is really how to scale your business outside of generating revenue and building a team. We really want to focus on the actual operations of the firm and how it can help you scale internally. So with that, I'm going to talk about how you can get started with doing this, how to organize your service offerings. This is important because you need to make sure that not only yourself, but your team and your clients have clarity on what services you're offering, and you're making sure you're actually delivering the services you're promising. We're also going to talk about the tips on how to implement new processes into your practice, along with tips on how to integrate technology systems, existing and new, and how to incorporate your team into this entire transition. So I wanted to just dive into a quick fact that I found, just looking through everything the past few months. So Charles Schwab does this benchmark study every year about the cost and investments that you have to make to keep your business running. So I read that on average, a director of operations costs a company 110 plus a year. And this is not only cash compensation, but there's also profit sharing opportunities too for the average firm. So I found this very interesting because when I work with firms, they're running into so many problems, because if you're a small business, this may not be something you can do currently. So you're kind of stuck, like, okay, what do I do if I can't afford a 6-figure salary on the books? So there are some things that you can do. But what's happening is that we're in a tough situation. So firms are hiring operations support team members who are not necessarily the director of operations, but they're able to assist. And they are getting bogged down with trying to juggle all of these projects while maybe servicing clients as well. Or the second option I have is that the CEO is becoming the chief of everything, and you're trying to wear all these different hats and you're wearing the COO hat. So a lot of small business owners are in a position where you are the rainmaker, you are the manager, and you are trying to scale your operations, and that can get hectic. So today I really want to focus on what we can do if you're in this situation, step by step. So this is not going to be a magic bullet situation today, but I'm hoping that you can gain a little bit of knowledge that you can quickly add to your practice. So I put a lot in this presentation, just disclaimer, and I hope I was not overly ambitious today. So I have my clock up to make sure that I can get through everything, but I just wanted to let you know that you will have the slides after, and I will give you a guide on everything that we talked about. So what can we do? So how can operations help you scale? So with the situation that I mentioned previously, there are some tools that you can integrate. So when you're building your operations, you want to look at streamlining first, automating second, and then hiring third. So if we start off with number one, streamlining, this is where a lot of businesses fall because it's hard to invest the time into understanding what you're actually doing in your business. So here is where you may be in a situation where you feel like you're reinventing the wheel over and over again. Every time you get a new client, it's just not seamless. You're always trying to make sure you have everything, or you're answering the same questions over and over again with your team. So if you are running into problems like that, you probably need to focus on streamlining. So what does that mean? Streamlining your operations means documenting your processes, organizing the different systems that you have. So what technology systems are a part of the process, looking at the standard deliverables that you have in place, document checklists, email templates, meeting prep checklists, really getting everything together and then looking at and auditing it, seeing if there's any inefficiencies that you can work on to make the process better. So after you streamline, then you want to go into automating. So a lot of people want to jump to automation, but it is very essential to start with number one. If you automate on bad processes, it's going to be a disaster. Clients may get notifications at the wrong time. Your team may not understand that technology is now completing a task and they no longer have to do it. So you really want to make sure that everyone on your team has clarity before automating. So if you are an advisor who feels confident in your client experience, you feel confident in delegating to your team, this is when you may want to look into automating. So if your team has clarity and they understand your process, you are doing great with servicing your clients and you want to free up more time, you want to look at automating. So understanding technology is very different from automating technology. Understanding your tech is step one. Automating your tech is step two. So what does that mean? So Redtail has automations within the CRM. So after you have your processes built in Redtail, you may want to see, okay, what else can I automate now that the processes are in place? So that's one option. Another option, a lot of advisors like Zapier. Zapier is a third-party system that allows two systems to speak to each other. So Redtail is on Zapier, and you can see if other systems are available for you to find some solutions there. So after you've done step 1 and step 2, the final step is hiring. So I am very guilty as a business owner to hire before 1 and 2 is complete. We all do it because we don't have time to streamline and automate when we're running our business wearing our multiple hats. So it happens. Sometimes you may hire someone new and their job is to help you with 1 and 2. But if you remember on the last slide, I said you're hiring people who are entry-level operations staff who really don't have the experience to do steps 1 and 2. So it may be redundant and you still may have holes in your process. So again, it's important to have a streamlined solution in place. And then once you hire, that new team member can easily plug into your processes. And then on top of that, some manual steps are also automated, so you can reduce the amount of work that you are passing off to that person. So that's pretty much just high level what I want to go over today. So I'm going to start diving into like how you can get started with number 1. So today we'll primarily be discussing how to streamline, and then from there, plugging in the right tech tools to help you get to the automation piece as well. And I'll try to keep an eye out on the chat as we go. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in, and then I'll try to address them as needed. And then, of course, there'll be time at the end. So at the top of your big ops project to enhance the client journey, of course, you want to get organized. And I know that as advisors and people who work in the industry, you're very familiar with the term get organized, because most of the firms I work with start off with this in the planning process as well. But what does it look like in an operations process? So the first step is you want to organize existing documents. This can include templates, so any email templates that you have. If you don't have email templates, you could use past email correspondence that you're sending to clients through those big areas in your process, such as prospecting, client onboarding, meeting preparation, meeting follow-up. Just gather what you already have in place. And then questionnaires. If you have any questionnaires in technology systems or in a fillable PDF, you want to make sure that you have that. So then we can organize what you're currently utilizing. Another thing I didn't mention on here is making sure you have a list of your technology. You want to make sure you have that too. And then secondly, you want to identify team structure. So I think this is really important, and I used to glaze over this, but I'm finding that it's very essential for your client journey. So where are the gaps with your staff? So I typically see that a lot of people overlap in responsibilities, and firms are struggling with holding their team accountable. So really telling the team, like your team member, you are in charge for the client experience and client servicing, and someone else may be responsible for investment management services. So really mapping out what everyone does in your team's important. And then later in this presentation, I'm also going to talk about how to tie people to roles so you can scale in that aspect as well. My third point here is pulling the data of client information. This is another big thing that I think firms should look at. What does your existing client base look like, and how are you servicing them? So I am working with a firm right now who has 2 advisors on staff, and they want to bring on a junior advisor. So we were looking at the number of households that are at the firm, what's realistic for each advisor, and what's our game plan for that new junior advisor to take on some of the clients for their client base. So it's important to have that data in place as well. Finally, having a vision. This is when you really need to think about what you want long term. You don't want to dig into this big project without clarity on where you're trying to go. So I really work with firms to help create change and positive change, hopefully. Um, so you can have more freedom to do the things that you want in your business. It may be, I've worked with firms who want to spend more time at home with their family. That's a reason to scale your client journey. People want to bring on more clients. That's a reason to scale your client journey. And then I think the biggest thing is delegating to your team so you can start doing things that you actually enjoy and doing things that only you can do, which is being client facing, being in those client meetings to provide your expertise. So once you have all of your information gathered, then we're going to talk about technology. So I like to look at tech at the top of this process because there's so much that goes into this. When you are selecting technology and figuring out how it integrates into your process, you may have to add new solutions into the tech stack. You may need your team to work on some implementation on the back end while you start building out your processes. So there's a few things here why I like to start off with it. Now, this is high level. You don't have to figure out how to automate everything up front, but you really want to have an understanding of how these different tools tie into your process. So to start, you want to have that summary of tech. And then I'm going to show you on the next few slides of how your tech should tie into your client journey, starting with prospecting. So this is just a sample prospect to client technology map. So what you want to look for when you are analyzing your technology solutions are how does it integrate with your other tools? So I started off with prospect generators. Really, this is lead generators. So you want to identify how are you getting inbound leads. So it could be from your website, which is the most common now, and referrals is the second most common. And then you might have a find an advisor tool on, if you're an FPA member, XYPN. There's a lot of different companies that are allowing the public to search for a financial professional. And then finally, webinars. So this is all contact information that needs to be housed somewhere. I recommend storing this information in Redtail or an email marketing system. So there's no right or wrong answer here, but you need to track it. So if you're someone that gets a lot of unqualified leads, you may only want to put those leads into MailChimp, which is the email marketing platform for this sample. I recommend this because I had a firm a few years ago that told me they did not want to track any unqualified leads. And then 3 years later, they came back to me because they wanted to start a webinar series for those clients who couldn't fit their ideal client profile. So they ended up creating a service that worked for those people that they were turning away in the past. So if you have a list in MailChimp where anyone can sign up, I recommend putting them there. For qualified leads, I think it would be good to put them in Redtail. So Redtail has the opportunities feature where you can track those types of contacts. And if you want to be reminded to follow up with them, you can also have them in Redtail. So from there, Redtail is now your hub for tracking information, storing information, managing workflows, everything. Most firms don't really know how to maximize it more and still be efficient. So you may run into problems where you are getting the data in Redtail, but you want to make sure that it's flowing into these other tools. So when you're doing your technology map, I think in Redtail, they have manager integrations and other CRMs do as well. Look and see what onboarding systems are available and After you do that, read about what that integration actually means. I have so many advisors that are like, oh, this system integrates with Redtail, but is that integration essential for your process? This is where it's important when you're mapping this out. So from Redtail, you want to push everything into these systems under onboarding. So this is when the client actually gives you information. So in the past, like when I was working in a wealth management firm, I would get a piece of paper and I would have to manually add the client into all of these systems. But luckily we are beyond that. And we're also more collaborative now. So with eMoney, you can send a link for the client to onboard themselves into the system. Precise FP is a form software where clients can input their data as well. And what's great, both systems integrate with Redtail along with Orion as well. So when the client provides their information, you're getting the information from the source that automatically can push back into Redtail through the syncing features. And from there, I recommend maintaining Redtail in your custodian. So when you're opening the new account, you can populate the Redtail, you can populate the contact from Redtail into the custodian. The biggest pain point that I'm hearing from advisors is that they're not keeping up with client contact information. So Schwab, TD Ameritrade, Fidelity, you may get an email notification that a client's email has changed, but you haven't updated it in Redtail. Because if you think about it, if you're updating Redtail, it syncs with these other systems. So you want to have a central location for all accurate information. So that's prospect to client. On my next slide, I want to talk about the planning process. So when you're looking at technology, you also want to map out the ongoing client process as well. So something I want to mention is that when you're doing this, look at your existing tech, and then you may find opportunities to add new systems. So if we start off with data gathering, most firms don't have a software to collect information. So that's probably the most common thing that we're adding to the tech stack for advisors. So for data gathering, we have Redtail, eMoney, and Precise FP. Again, Precise FP is a data gathering tool, and eMoney is a planning software. So for data gathering, Redtail is the internal maintenance for your firm. So this is where someone from your team will go in and see, okay, what happened at the last meeting? Are we missing any information? When does this client need scheduled? So that's what you want to reference there. And then any updates from the client you can have through eMoney or Precise FP. So eMoney is typically, if accounts are broken, they go into eMoney. If there's client task in eMoney, the client can complete them there. And then Precise FP can be used to ask any questions from the client in preparation of the meeting. I also recommend scheduling software too to collect information. If you just want to know, were there any updates since you last spoke, or simple questions, you can add them into Calendly or Schedule Once to ask that. From there, you go into analyzing the data. So these are just 3 tools that advisors could use to, run scenarios in eMoney, along with looking at the accounts in Orion. And Quanti is a tool to analyze investments. And then after that, we go into reviewing updates with the clients, which is, to me, is the actual meeting. So what systems are you using to actually have an output with the client? A lot of advisors are now doing this interactively, where they're just pulling up Orion and eMoney during the meeting and reviewing it with the client live. And then after the meeting, they're just printing out a report for the client to have and adding it to their vault. From there, you go into recommendations, which to me, recommendations is just summarizing the meeting, and also assigning next steps. So the easiest solution for assigning next steps to your clients is using the task feature, which is available in eMoney and Right Capital. I don't believe Money Guide Pro has this. They actually do. I've actually seen it. So all the systems have it, but I know eMoney and Right Capital, you can send email reminders for clients to complete their tasks by logging into the portal. So what you can do here is add all client tasks into the system. You can either download the report or just tell them to go into the portal to complete it. And then finally, we have monitoring the plan. So this is just making sure everything's up to date on the planning side, and if you're managing investments on the investment side. So that's pretty much technology Spark Notes version. One thing I did not add on here is how to power your CRM. So when you are trying to figure out what tools should be integrated into Redtail, just make sure you're looking for what the integrations actually are and how they will impact this process.
Yeah,
So it looks.
I think the stuff that you're mentioning is so key, because you got to kind of think about the bottleneck in your process. And a lot of the times people are spending an entire meeting just data gathering, where there could be an entire software that can do all of that data gathering for you. So that way you're kind of getting to the meat and potatoes of the conversation during the meeting, instead of saying, okay, well, what's your address? Those are things that you can kind of put on the prospect's plate to say, all right, you fill out this good, clean data. It'll funnel into my Redtail system. And then we can kind of conversate and get to this, the content that I'm providing in the meeting.
Yeah, I agree. It looks like we got a question about what electronic calendars link with Redtail. So most do if you're using Zapier. So I know you can link G Suite, Outlook, Calendly, Schedule Once, Acuity with Zapier to do that. So if you are, and then Nora, I don't know if you have anything to add with the direct integrations for Redtail Calendar as well.
Yeah, I'd say, if you want your calendars to kind of sync with each other, we have an integration with Google and Outlook. Of course, those are in the moment and instant. We also have iCal, which it sounds like it's exclusive for Apple, but it's not. It's called Internet Calendar, so you can download the Redtail calendar into your phone's calendar, or your computer's calendar, whatever you need. There's things like that. But I think what your actual question is more talking about the Schedule Once and Calendly. And as the system exists today, there is not an integration built out that we've done. It is in the pipeline, but we still need to test it, break it, and all of that before we release it out. So like Charisse mentioned, in the meantime, Zapier is going to be the best friend there. That's going to make those links happen, where somebody can schedule something in Calendly with you and it'll push that into Redtail. So that's going to help out a lot. And I know Zapier offers, I think, 5 Zaps for free, if I'm not mistaken. So it is something worth checking out.
Yeah. And then I'm just going to take this final question for tech, and then we're going to talk about the service models. So someone asked, what's the best way to manage documents if you use Precise FP and Redtail? Because I don't think they sync with the same document software. So I don't know who is using Redtail to manage documents, but it would depend on the document storage system that you are using. So I would look at what systems are available for Precise FP. And I know that when people upload documents to Precise FP, those documents can then be synced into whatever document storage systems are available for that system. So I would look into that integration. Okay, so those are all good questions. So now that we've talked about tech, and remember, I'm going to leave some time at the end for more questions, I want to talk about auditing your service models. So after you have your technology selected, then you want to think about what services are going to be a part of your firm. So when you're looking at service models, I'm thinking tiers of service, not the client service calendar. So it may be investment management only, planning only, which is very popular now. Everyone's adding that to their business model. It could be the subscription model or one-time plan, and then investment management only. So you want to think about what service models do you have in your business. So you want to understand the benefits of each service. If you're adding something new to your firm, it may be hard to see the benefits and the type of client the service is going to attract, because it's going to impact the overall client experience depending on the type of client you have. So we all know retirees, pre-retirees, and young professionals have different planning needs. So their touch points throughout the year may look different. Also thinking about the planning topics that you're going to include in each service model are important. And you want to think about what happens beyond the financial planning process. So what other wow factors and perks should be incorporated in your service model? So with some firms, clients who are more on the comprehensive model, they may add more wow factors like anniversary gifts, birthday gifts, special dinners with that household. It just depends, whatever you want to add to that. And then you want to take price and cost into consideration. So I always would talk about pricing, but I never talked about cost. So when I say cost, that means what staff is involved in these different service models, the wow factors that you're providing, how much is that going to cost? So you can think about, all right, who really should be on these different models? So when you're building out your service models, make a section for staff and just write out all the different members of your team and how they impact the service models. An example would be, okay, if you have a paraplanner on staff, that paraplanner may not ever touch investment management only, because the client service person is helping you with that client. But the paraplanner is an additional cost for those who are comprehensive clients or planning only clients. So that's kind of what I mean there. So once you have your service models segmented, then you want to build the client service calendar around those different service models. And typically the service calendar is different between each service offering. So when you're building your client experience out, you want to think about the getting started process. So if you remember that text slide where I wrote prospect to client, it was very high level, but what are the touch points? What meetings are you having to get someone from prospect to new client? It's important to guide potential clients through your process because you are an expert in this industry. So you should understand what is the best discovery phase for new clients. And then also you can add supporting deliverables to help with that process as well. After that, you want to think beyond the getting started process. So I like to map out year one and then ongoing. Most of the time, year one has the most upfront work. So you want to make sure that you have that mapped out. And then after someone's plan has fully been implemented, how are you going to maintain that after the first year? And then finally, you want to incorporate all client touch points into the process. So like I mentioned, those wow factors, anything outside of the meeting that you're doing, you want to make sure you have in your service calendar, along with identifying who's responsible for each touch point. Again, I think one of the biggest areas of improvement I'm seeing is making sure you're having your team responsible for certain tasks. Like, I understand a group effort, but at the end of the day, when something needs to get done, who is responsible for it? So on the next slide, I put a sample calendar in here. So this is high level example of what a sample service calendar would be. So if, let's say this was for your comprehensive planning schedule, where you're providing investment management along with financial planning. At the top, you see the legend is categorized by the role. So previously I talked about those who are involved in your practice. The people need to be tied to roles. So then as you scale, you're filling the role, not the person, which helps as your team continues to grow. So if you look at this calendar, the advisor is 100% client facing, and then the rest of the team is filling in the gaps. So this is just high level, but I think there could be more in here. Like one thing I didn't add in here is like the tax planning checklist that gets sent out in February, coordination with outside professionals. There's many things that you can add in here, but remember, this is a proactive calendar. This isn't a calendar where you are reacting to what your client needs. So try to think through what you've seen since you've been in business and what touch points need to happen. Open enrollment is a big one. A few years ago, I kept getting advisors who always will get bogged down around that time because they didn't have a process in place for that. So this is foundational. So we talked about how to get organized, how to map out your technology, service models, service calendar. The next part of this presentation is going to discuss how to integrate this into your daily operations. So I'm looking at the chat. It doesn't look like I have any more questions around the service calendar, so I'm going to keep going. But if you have any questions, again, make sure you add them in there.
I know I'm a visual person, so I think that calendar is beautiful. That is just
thank you.
Awesome.
Yes, advisors, I think the biggest thing about that calendar is just that it really shows you what you're doing, and people feel so much more confident when they see everything mapped out. And I think the team, when I go over this with team members, they're so empowered to see, okay, this is what I'm responsible for. And this is when everyone starts to get a little bit more chatty.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it empowers them. So now they take ownership of it. It's not like they feel awkward about asking if they can take over this role or anything. It's like, okay, this is mine. I get to do what I want with it. And I think that really empowers. I think that's the secret to a lot of good business, is empowering your employees, and letting them know in the front end what they're responsible for can really help with that empowerment.
Yes, I agree. And I think like with my next point, you can give a responsibility to people, but as business owners, as managers, we have to make sure that they know how to do it to your standard, So when we talk about building your daily operations, this is when you're at the point where you've made the decisions for the technology, you've made the decision on the service models that you want to offer in the service calendar. And now we need to organize that and get processes built out to support those processes. The first thing I recommend for you to do is assign a committee. So if you're a larger firm, you may want to select 2 to 3 people who can be involved in manning this process, in this project. If it's just you and another team member, I usually recommend for advisors to stay as the decision maker and then have someone on their team to implement if you have a smaller team. Then there's also other outsourced solutions that you can plug in for a short-term project. From there, you want to identify key metrics. So your key metrics should be driven off of your service models and your service calendar. So what I mean by that, if you have 3 different tiers of clients, those are key metrics. So Redtail has different fields in the system for you to track this data. So contact status, contact category, those are key metrics. The opportunities feature in Redtail, those are key metrics that you want to have mapped out. And along with keywords, I like to use keywords for all of the touch points in the service calendar. Anything you need to keep track of, turn into a keyword and get it assigned to the appropriate person and client. After that, I want firms to map out workflow blueprints. Do not put workflows drafts into Redtail. It's better to organize outside of the system before putting it into the system. So you can just get a Word doc or an Excel sheet and just map out step by step what you do. The columns that we have in our workflow blueprints are step, task, description, outcomes, if you want to use outcomes for Redtail, and then another column for automation. So I like to have that automation in there. You want to do that last though. The priority is getting the steps and the tasks mapped out. And then from there, you want to update and prepare supporting documents. So pretty much we talked about getting organized and gathering what you already have. Now you want to revamp it and you want to elevate it. So typical supporting documents that impact a workflow would be anything that you need to complete a step. So for example, send the new client welcome email. You should have a document checklist in there. You should have a summary of the technology that the client's going to use, whatever you need to help the client get from point A to point B. Or another big one is a meeting prep checklist. How can your team help you with preparing for a meeting if you don't have a prep checklist in place either? So that's pretty much what you need to start building your daily operations. After you have built your processes and mapped them out, then you want to implement them into technology and your CRM. So what does that look like? The first thing that you want to do is organize your CRM. So what I mean there is organizing the clients and the contacts in your CRM. So making sure you have COIs categorized correctly, prospects, clients, those keywords that I mentioned for the service calendar. Make sure that's all updated so the data is accurate. And then from there, you want to store your processes in a central location. So what I mean here is there's workflows and there's SOPs, so standard operating procedures. People try to blend both, but they're two separate things. So a workflow is a checklist with a timeline. So if you need someone to complete a client onboarding, they'll have that checklist to do it. But they also need the manual and the instructions to complete certain things. So a standard operating procedure may be your procedure for setting up a client in eMoney, like those direct instructions, or how to prepare a financial plan. Those types of things won't be in the actual workflow, but they may be outside in another system. So what I recommend is if you're just starting out and you want to start building SOPs, you could use a Google Doc or any tool that you're using to store your documents. Just create a folder for processes and workflows and start writing the actual step-by-steps instructions on how to get things done. Another option would be using a system like Traineo or Suite Process to start documenting the instructions and creating videos. So what I do is I take those links and then add them into the workflow step descriptions. So if someone says, if you get a client onboarding checklist, the instructions for how to complete everything is actually linked into Redtail. And then as you're implementing into your technology systems and CRM, you also want to find opportunities to automate the process. So this is when you want to look at systems like Zapier, making sure all your integrations are activated and so forth. And then finally, you want to create standard reports in your CRM. So as this would be for the advisor or the managers to think about, if there's any metrics that you want to keep track of, make sure there's reports in Redtail for you to run. And you can easily tell someone from your team, these are the reports that I would like for us to manage, and let's review them on a quarterly or annual basis. Some reports that I see are the opportunities, close versus won ratios. People may also want to track how many new clients are coming in per quarter. It's endless. And so after that, I just have a slide or two left. You want to map out a training plan. So that's one part of heavy lifting, but then this part, training, can also be a little challenging. You want to assign a lead here, and this leader should be responsible for maintaining the new processes and tech as well. So when any change needs to happen, this person's responsible for making those updates, and this person is responsible for training the team as well. As you select a lead, then you want to brief your team on what's to come and what your plans are. So you want to identify resources. So I mentioned a few: having the SOP system in place, Redtail, seeing what things they have in their knowledge base, also seeing what other vendors have available to help your team understand how to utilize the system, along with understanding how the support works. This all doesn't have to fall on you. A lot of vendors want to make sure you adopt their technology because that's how they stay in business. So make sure you tap into that, and then create an ongoing training timeline. So month 1, what do you want to accomplish? Month 2, month 3, and so forth. And then finally, just remember that no process is ever truly complete. You're always going to be revising, especially with technology updates and changes of services and staff. So keep that in mind and complete regular process audits. I typically find that advisors look at processes on average annually. Quick updates. You don't have to do this process I went over today every year, but like maintaining what you've built annually. Usually this happens in the summer. So an operations person in the summer may knock this project out and just continue to determine what's working and what's not.
Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 800-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.